Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Okay, everybody, today's guest is very near and dear to my heart. We have Pilar Alessan with us. She's a story and script coach. She's also the author of The Coffee Break Screenwriter, host of On the Page podcast, and she's a professor in MFA screenwriting at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. And she is also the only reason that I'm even a screenwriter, which I'll happily share that information with y'all. So thank you, Pilar, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I love this podcast.
Hi, Pilar. It's nice to meet you. And I appreciate you, saying nice things about the podcast because you have a lot of experience in that realm, which is cool.
Oh my God. Yeah. Almost 1,000 episodes. And that 1,000th episode will be July 20th, I believe. And then I'm going to end the podcast because
my goodness,
1,000 is a big number.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm done. I'm cool.
July 20th is my daughter's birthday.
Oh,
Another one of my friend's birthday, and one of my longest friends who actually married my wife and I. So I told him that my thank you for him marrying us was us to have our child on his birthday.
oh, that's
Yep.
Which
lovely.
obviously I had very little to do with. But
That is so sweet. I'm
Yes.
glad that's the day that, the podcast is going out in style. Feel like I'm in free company. Awesome.
A day of celebration.
Right.
All right, Pilar. Well, we are very, very excited to have you here, get to pick your brain a little bit. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do so that everybody can understand, because we have a lot of creatives that listen to our podcast, but I don't think a lot of folks understand the film TV world, and also like, what does it even mean to be a story and script coach?
Sure. So yes, I am on the coaching side. On the Page was started in 2001 as some private classes to teach writers. And it became something where I was also consulting. Well, I had been consulting a little bit, but it became sort of that was the business, was consulting and teaching. And the classes grew to writing groups. My own business, after I, released a DVD, which was big, also turned into public speaking. So I was doing a lot of international speaking about TV and film and teaching. And now that I'm in North Carolina teaching for somebody else, I devote most of my time that I'm not teaching at UNCSA to consulting story to script with writers from concept through finished draft. So it's been a business that has evolved. It's sort of changed with my life. It's changed with the needs of my writers. But overall, I teach and I coach people through writing their scripts.
So can you elaborate a little bit on, kind of that evolution, and why did the business evolve over time? Why did your life evolve over time? Because I think that's something that, as we talk about like the drip, trickle, flow, flood kind of life, it really is, it's a never ending journey. And so that evolution of the different phases of life and making those changes for whatever's going on. Yeah. If you could talk about, what kind of led you to these different, points in your business and just profession.
Sure. Teaching privately was born out of being pregnant. I was about to have my first baby. I was teaching for another organization that I wasn't that happy with. The students, well, I'm not going to go into that I don't want to go into all the dirt, but basically I started realizing that I had value as a teacher, and that if I did it on my own, I'd actually be able to work a little bit less for a little bit more money. So I started sort of thinking about what people needed, and I realized that where I was, there wasn't a rewrite class. So after I left that organization with plenty of notice, I went and taught a rewrite class, and people showed up. And uh, being so it yeah, it came out of the need to kind of make more money and have more control of my time. The business interestingly evolved because busy parents were also taking the class, and working parents, just like me. And I started realizing that they were using the class as their writing time, and started developing my materials so that we could fit in these pockets of writing as they were learning, which became the basis for my book, The Coffee Break Screenwriter, which is all about taking 10 minutes and writing when you have a really busy life. So my writers, that helped me evolve. So it was really off of the needs of them that I took their lead and started creating materials. The private writing group came out of people needing feedback and needing sort of a more structured way to do it. And I would do those at night when my husband was home to take care of the kids. So a lot of this was around being a busy working parent. I would make my business work for myself, but I would also be making it work for other busy working parents.
I think that's awesome that saw where you were in your state of life. Cause I feel like often we battle where we are in life, right? And, we're just running into walls over and over and over again because we think we should be doing something instead of stepping back and say, okay, this is the phase of life I'm in right now. And then not only did you make that work for you, you saw a market there of all these other people that were in, I guess a similar phase of life where, those hours where you're available are often very small and sometimes it's strange hours. So you did that. And then, so what was the next step of saying, okay, now I'm going to go work for a university and that sort of thing. And you've obviously started a podcast and just kind of expanded your world.
Sure. Well, actually, I'm gonna go back before UNCSA. There was another tier where I ended up getting pregnant again, and again was like, okay, now I'm gonna have two kids. So these little private writing groups that I would hold in my living room or renting a space, for my classes, I was sort of all over the place. That second pregnancy made me go, you know what? I'm gonna have my own studio. And an acting teacher friend of mine, we went in together and we opened our own studio, a writing acting studio over a 7-Eleven in Sherman Oaks. And so that felt like a whole new thing, to have your own place. And I stayed there for 9 years and then went over to a more bougie place for 7 years in Studio City. During that time, the podcast was born, and it started in 2007 when there isn't a huge glut of screenwriting podcasts like there is now. So it let me build this international audience of people who were listening all over the world, so that if I decided to go to London, and I kind of tried this as an experiment myself to see if it would work, I had a class, people showed up, it paid for my trip to London. And then after that, other organizations internationally started inviting me on their dime. And that really helped.
Not only did you get income, the trip was a write-off.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now I'd love to say I was, getting rich at all this, but I was never great with money, and I wasn't, but I was building a reputation. I was supporting my family. Um, so yeah, not rich, but living on this business. So UNCSA came about because, now it's jump all the way like 25 years. All right. And uh my kids are now grown. They are 21 and 25, and they live in Boston and Brooklyn. And I was living in Los Angeles, and a housing situation I was in wasn't going as well as I wanted it to. So we were thinking about moving anyway. And then out of the blue, a person who was in that original writing group, who is now a professor at UNCSA MFA, it's producing, said, "Hey, we need an adjunct. Would you come on over here to North Carolina?" And I took one look at the Zillow listings and I said, "Yes, I will." And now I'm on faculty. Um, so it was very fortunate to get that. But also, I think that's the value of being in a business for a long time and cultivating a wonderful group of writers like Melissa. Um, they evolve. They'll turn around and hire you one day. So it all felt very full circle. And I love teaching screenwriting on the MFA level at UNCSA. It's great. I don't have to hustle for classes anymore. That university is doing all the hustling for me. And then I have the other income of my consultation, and it feels nicely balanced.
I think you make a good point with that, Pilar, and you and I have had a lot of private conversations about this, but every person is different, right? Every business owner is different. Some enjoy the marketing piece of it, the selling piece of it, and some people don't. And I think, like you said, your heart is with the story. It's with, the helping of the writers and having to like constantly fill classes, which was your model previously. It was like, here's a new class, the next 6 weeks, the next 6 weeks. So it was like rolling enrollment always. There was a constant sales cycle that was becoming stressful. So now this drip, trickle, flow, flood, which we'll dig more into with you about, seems more energetically lined up with what you personally want. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to do the hustle. I hate the hustle. I have always looked to Melissa, her newsletters, for inspiring me with, okay, if this is the hustle you're doing, how can you make it better and more authentic? So that's helped. But yeah, it's a lot of stress. So I needed the break from that a bit. Hmm.
I totally feel you. I love the creating this stuff, and I really dislike the promoting and I think Melissa and I Substacks are perfect examples of that. Because I have this blog that I, do a couple times a year, and Melissa going, "You need to get your Substack going. It'll be great for drip, trickle, flow, flood." So I set it all up, and I don't know. I posted a couple times, and there it sits where Melissa's is like robust. And I'm always getting pinged that there's a new Substack from Melissa. And I think it is just like this. She is such a good example of like doing all those things that need to be done to propel your own business forward. But I also think there's a lot of wisdom in just like knowing yourself, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you'll actually do. And, I think that's awesome that you kind of have this balance of you get to go teach, which is what you love to do. And then you still have this other thing on the side. That's, it's part of why I do, the sports coaching I do is I just show up and coach. I get asked to be head coach. I've been asked over the years, and I go, no, I literally want to show up and just coach the kids and not have to worry about anything else. And there's something cool about that. And talk about, how that lets you just dive into the passion and not have that noise around it.
It does. It really does, because it became always a source of worry if you're if your family is dependent on your business and your business is dependent on people coming to class, you better constantly be trying to remind them about this without being too pushy. So yeah, not having that is good. Now, the podcast also was my marketing. I never put any commercials on it because as far as I was concerned, it was a big commercial for me and my guests who would come on. We would promote whatever they were writing or working on. Um, I will say that your drip, trickle, flow, flood model really helps because I make sure and keep my recorded classes because I did switch to Zoom only in 2020. I did have to give up my studio in 2020, switch to Zoom, which actually became an easier, more profitable mode for me, actually. But I have these classes that I taught on Zoom that stay on my website and becomes a trickle of income because you can still buy the recorded classes. So that's still there, which means that I do have to keep up the hustle and promotion a little bit. And I'm trying to think of ways now that the podcast has ended to make sure and kind of put myself out there in a helpful way. And I'm still kind of working on that with social media and stuff. I don't love it, but I want to do it. I have to do it. And that is evolving as we speak.
Now, you said something earlier, and obviously only talk about what you're comfortable with, but you had mentioned earlier, you said, and I'm not great with money. And so obviously only talk about what you're comfortable with, but you had mentioned to me that our podcast had spurned some conversations for you. And so whatever you're comfortable with sharing, we'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, how was having those financial conversations or learning more about money, how did that change things for you? Because that seemed to align with this move and the different way that you're doing things in your business.
Absolutely. So when I say I'm not great with money, what I mean is I'm not great at adulting with money. Like the idea of like, I stayed outside of a real job, right? I was always working for myself. So the idea of 401ks and this and that, like I don't get it, and I'm still learning about it. And here I am of a certain age. So that's what I mean is like I'm fairly sort of ignorant and I'm learning on the job. But even worse is my husband. So when I met Pat, he was coming off the road as a stand-up comic. Okay. So, we were always people who did sort of like contract jobs and gig economy and all that stuff. So again, he knows even less. So when your theory of drip, trickle, flow, flood came in, I was like, oh, Pat, this is how we live. This is how we are. And it's okay. He has a podcast called Rock Solid, which is great. It's music and comedy. And he has a Patreon. And that is a flow of money that comes in once a month, small flow. Then he also works at Trader Joe's. That's his flow of money. And we were talking about he does some Cameo, and that is like a drip of money that comes in. And we were talking like, how could this, you could create a trickle for this. Like when we were using this language of, oh, here are all these things that we're doing that we thought made us less than, but really is just different streams of income. And we had a name for it. Then we can speak that language to each other and it doesn't feel so overwhelmingly, I don't know, adult. It feels like something we can handle. So, I'm waiting for a little flood, very small flood of money from a conference that I just ran. And I could use that language when I talk to Pat, like, okay, we can't pay this big bill yet, but I'm waiting for this flood. And when we do, we can do that. So it's really helped how we talk about money with each other.
hearing you say, just what you said means a lot to me because I can't tell you how many people look at Lindsay, my wife, and I kind of cross eyed when they ask us what we do. And it's like, my quick answer is I'm like, well, I write, I coach, and I podcast, and I'm like, if you really want to get into it, if you have an hour, I'm happy to explain all the different things I'm doing and all the different stuff. And it is, I'm glad that by listening to this podcast, this has resonated with you and it's giving you that dialogue with your husband and your way to organize this money and understand that income streams can change and that they all can serve a purpose and they just the ability of them to work together can be really powerful. And so anyways, it's great to hear you say that. It does mean a lot that all these conversations that Melissa and I are having is actually having an impact because, I do hear from people occasionally, but podcast listeners aren't an overly vocal bunch. I don't bump into them that often out in the real world.
No, it really is such a, a doable philosophy. And like I said, I think it makes you feel like, oh, no, I am working. This is real. This, you gave a name to it. I will let you know too that um with my MFA screenwriters, I teach a career strategies class and that I impart your wisdom with the trickle, this drip, trickle, flow, flood, because I know that they're going to go out in the world and they are going to have sort of their overall creative goal, like, Melissa and being a working screenwriter. But until they get there are going to be creative side hustles that should also be considered, real income for them. And they might start as a trickle, but they could be a flow and they could also be going, still achieving their dream of being a working screenwriter. But as Melissa said, that can take a while till you're paid and then you get a flood, So in the meantime, be working on those trickles and flows. And so we have this conversation in that class. And hopefully they'll go out into the world thinking like you all have taught them.
Thank you for imparting that wisdom, by the way, to your class. I think nothing grinds my gears more, and our listeners will be sick of hearing me say this, than creatives who are not thinking of their work as a business and instead just saying, I'm a writer, right? Or I'm a filmmaker or whatever, like plug whatever in. I'm an actor. Plug something in. There's a huge stigma, and we've had lots of guests on to talk about this in the creative industry, that a lot of identity gets wrapped into that title. So if I'm to say I'm a screenwriter, but I'm making money with other drips, trickles, flows, and floods, there are folks in the industry who would say you're not a screenwriter because that's not your primary source of income or your only source of income, right? And there are
Right.
times it is primary and times it isn't. It just really depends. As you said, it goes back and forth. My belief has always been, I own a business. The business is me. and and it's also a production company. But that business means that there are lots of different ways that I can bring in income under that umbrella of, and for me, it's storytelling. And we've had Tony's cousin on, who's also an amazing producer out of LA. And he does the same thing. He has, he makes projects that go to Sundance, and then he also makes projects for brands, right? And it's like, what's bringing in the money? Mostly the brand projects. But that doesn't make him less of a producer. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, Pilar, because you work with so many different students at all levels. You have, people from the very beginning, all the way to people who've won Emmys, and I mean, you're all over the place. So, like, what do you hear around that, as far as like money, identity? Do you hear writers having these conversations? Are they more cloaked? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think we live in a time that is positive for a creator who does many things. that the stigma it might be off or nearly off with this, because we understand that there are all these different platforms for storytelling, that they don't all look one way anymore. And also, this idea of a creative side hustle has respect, right? So if you are making money doing something else while you're, trying to sell your script in a meeting, this may actually come up in a positive way. Oh, you're the person who also has that YouTube channel about so and so. Even if it's makeup brand, right? Like you're trying on makeup and you're getting, your uh you have people behind you and you're making money and all that, and it seems to have nothing to do with writing a script. That brings an audience to the script that you are writing. So nobody's hiding that anymore when they're in meetings. And so I do feel like that stigma was there, but for people who own all the things they do, what they're saying to a producer who might want to hire them is, I add extra value with all the things I know, the audience I've acquired, etc. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I've hired a lot of people over the years, a lot through the construction company that I had, and then hair salons and a variety of other things. And I would always look at resumes, the ones that had kind of a diversified experience. I always like those. One, because I know those people had kind of been out, experience in the world. And two, I knew they would be good problem solvers because they had these other experiences. So I like that, and we've talked a lot about, parallel experience and, having a job that's funding the dream and all of those things. But I like how you phrase that of, that especially now, right, where everybody's kind of their own promoter, they are I don't even know what the right word is, right? But people, they have their following that if they produce something, people might follow it.
Yeah.
So you're working with all of these people at varying different phases of, writing a screenplay. What makes someone, what characteristic, or what allows those people that actually see that through and, not necessarily create a hit, but are actually able to accomplish something, finish something, and, what makes a screenwriter successful, in quotes. And then I think we can, you know, sub out screenwriter most likely for woodworker, whatever, right? They're like, what trait is it that you see in people?
Well, and Melissa will agree that we've got screenwriters who are writing feature films and then people who are writing TV. So I'm going to just first talk about writing a feature film, okay? Because you can pretty much do that from anywhere, as opposed to writing TV where you really should be in LA or some kind of hub that has a lot of writers' rooms in it, because it's more like trying to get a job. You've got to be in the room. Okay. So let's just imagine that you're writing a script and you're anywhere in the world. I'm going to use one of my first students, again, brought into that first writing group. His name is Matt Harris. Okay. So we're going back to 2001. And the reason that I'm doing that is because he immediately won the Nickel Fellowship. That's a huge competition with lots of money and lots of cachet. And a lot of people think, oh, great, I'm going to sell a movie. Well, what they do is they ask you to write another one during that time. And he did. And everybody loved it. Okay. But it kept going through producer and director and producer and director. Now, in that time, I watched Matt continue to write. So that's really the most important thing I want to bring up, is that he wrote script after script in this writing group. Great. And I watched him live his life. He adopted 2 babies. He was writing in the reality space for clip shows. He went on to be a producer for clip shows. He went on to be the executive producer of a show you might have heard of called Ridiculousness on MTV. Okay. That ran forever. Now, I say all that because he was living his life, doing his job, which was creative, going up the ranks in that, and watching this script that everybody loved, right? Just change hands over and over and over again until 17 years later, it found Ted Melfi, the director, called him and said, I want to make this, and I will make it with Melissa McCarthy if you gender switch the leads. And I remember getting the text from him, like, should I do this? And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. He did it. It was made. It was sold to Netflix for $20 million. Okay. Not that he got $20 million, but he got a nice piece of that pie. Okay. It also had Kevin Kline in it. That movie went on to win, his script for it went on to win a Humanitas Award. In the meantime, remember all that stuff that he had written. Okay. So he had like 3 other scripts that he had written as well. So now everybody wants to see those. Okay. So his very first script that won the Nickel Fellowship in like 2001 became something called Dead for a Dollar. Walter Hill took it on and brought in this huge cast. The script changed in a big way. I like the original script more, and so does he. But it's, we're not going to turn down Walter Hill, this huge cast, and the money that went with it. Then another script that he had worked on was being looked at, and now people were bringing him in for meetings. So the idea is you have to keep writing as a screenwriter, because when one thing hits, then you have a flood of material to give them. And you have to keep living your life. And if that is, screenwriting adjacent, fine. If it's just living a really good life and continuing to write, fine. So that's how long it can take as a screenwriter. But the payoff will be worth it, especially if you have all that content that you continue to write. So I hope that's my big lecture. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. If I'm going to put that into one word, I'm going to say perseverance.
Absolutely.
Where you just kind of you just got to stick with it. I love that. So,
and I think Melissa's a great example of this. Melissa is constantly writing her next thing. That look at it as a business thing is, well, I'm creating a product, I'm creating another product, I'm creating another product, and so that I have the inventory, so it's not just, I believe in myself perseverance, it's perseverance plus product.
So Pilar,
we just finished one together.
You two did?
Yeah, I just finished a script. I mean, the way that I roll is like Pilar said, I always have a new script in the works. And so I've been fortunate, though, that a lot of times that already will have somebody attached to it. So it's sort of pre-sold. But I had like a nice chunk of time where I was like, I have this idea. I haven't pre-sold it. So I want to write it and then try to take it out. So, of course, I bring Pilar into that because she's the best. You have to hire her immediately for any of these things. It's a must, truly. I'm not kidding. It's very true. And we just finished and I just started taking it out and I already have it in like 10 people's hands at this point. It's only been a week. Well, we finished last week. So I mean, it goes quick. That's great. But that's how the business goes. And as Pilar said, it's also so important because 9 times out of 10, people will come back to you and say, this doesn't work for me. I pass on this. But if you have anything else to send me, I'm happy to read. And then I always have to have at least 1 or 2 others in my back pocket ready to go. So.
Absolutely.
Well, that leads right into my next question. I think maybe Melissa almost just answered it. But so you started this in 2001. It doesn't sound like it's a one and done with you. You're building these relationships with people and you're reviewing their scripts for years and years and years. And this is an ongoing working relationship. Why don't you talk about how that works?
It's it's such a really it's an awesome part of my job. And one I didn't expect. I didn't expect this would be such a people job. Um, but yeah, I have had the privilege of working with talented writers over and over again on their new scripts and watching their career evolve, like Melissa. Watching writer director client, win the jury prize at South by Southwest. Watching somebody who was just sort of working on a pilot as a writing sample get in the room and is now an executive producer on major shows. That's so much fun. I think with it though, I would like to give a shout out to age and longevity because you don't get that kind of view of the fruits of your labor when you're brand new at something. Over time is where you watch your clients evolve and where you become better at what you do too. And then you get to watch as you get to go, look at all that. Look at these people. Look at this wonderful network. So, you know, there is something to staying with something, learning from it, but also age can be a really cool thing. I feel the rewards of going like, oh yeah, look at all this. Look at all these people I know and what they do. It's really super cool.
Do you have stories of clients, students that you've worked with independently and then they end up interacting out in the real world that you didn't make the connection? They just like accidentally bump into each other?
Oh my God, all the time. And that's really cool. They'll be at a film festival and they'll be like, I bonded with this person and it turned out that they worked with you too, and they'll take pictures. Um, I love it when people meet in my classes. Uh, there was a let's see, Alexandra Grzinski and Jenny. Oh, I'm blanking on Jenny's last name, but they met in a class and they formed a marketing company together. And part of their marketing was they went on to write a script together for as a branded material for a company. So this stuff happens, and I also love, of course, when people meet romantically. That happens every once in a while too. So had
A
a marriage or
matchmaker.
two. Yes, a little marriage or two out of on the page, which is great. So sometimes it's in my classes where they'll really connect, and sometimes it's out in the world, and the connective tissue is the classes or the coaching. So that's super cool.
Pilar has a lot. I mean, she's very well known in our in our space, and she has a lot of success. So a lot of us know her, and it's smart to work with her from the very beginning. I said it earlier, I wouldn't have a screenwriting career without her, and it's true because I the only reason I even wrote a script in the first place is because I found her book in a random bookstore in Los Angeles before I even lived there. And I said, "Oh, I can write a screenplay in 10 minutes a day." And I wrote something, and then I was like, "I don't know what this is." And I emailed you and I said, "I don't know what to do now. Like, do you offer consultations?" And you're like, "Well, yes, that's my it's my job." And I didn't even know that existed. And I'll say, like, in our first call, you were so great because, and this is a testament to anybody who is just starting, you think like it's tough sometimes because you maybe feel a little nervous about your work or how it will go and how somebody's going to receive it. But what I loved about you, Pilar, is you said, this is not the writing of a new writer. So you were like very complimentary. You're very encouraging for me to keep going. And I think the script, it was a TV pilot. So it was like 58 pages. And you were like, and only 15 pages of this is usable. This. And I loved it because I'm like, yes, this is what I need exactly. And I worked with Pilar for 2 years without ever sending a darn thing out or contacting anybody or trying anything because I needed to learn. And I came into this in my mid 30s. I didn't go to college for this or anything. I had a writing background, of course, in a different dimension, but not this. And it was the best training ground and to have that. So it's just I want to give her her flowers.
Well, Melissa was like, I meant it, like just had talent, had a voice. It's what people are looking for is like, you know, what's what is that stamp that a writer brings and can you read it right there? And it was right there. There was a certain confidence with the words that said, oh, this is somebody who's going to go far. And she did. I will say, I started meeting with Melissa in person and I asked her what she did at the time. And she was like, oh, I'm this fancy marketing person. She tells me all about this. And I go, oh, wow, I could really use somebody like that. And she was like, yeah, I'm not taking new clients. No, that's what? But I was so shocked and impressed with that answer. I was like, she's just telling me no, right to my face. It was actually a really good business lesson and one I continue to learn from you, Melissa, this power of no that you have, because sometimes I have to channel that and be like, no is the answer. I have to say no. And that doesn't mean you lose the relationship. If anything, that helped our relationship grow.
Well, and that's a good point too for this is that you probably get asked to do all sorts of things, right? You could make money in all sorts of ways with the skills and the deep history and experience that you have. So what's an example of that that people come and ask for and it's a no for you now?
Well, it's actually one you were kind of part of. In 2020, I was on Zoom all the time and stuff, and I was really, really busy. And I started doing a process called story to script, which is breaking story, assigning deadlines, and reading scripts in chunks until the whole thing was built out. And it was more satisfying for me as somebody who could help develop, more satisfying for the writer because I wasn't reading the whole thing and then just throwing it back and saying, great, but we got to cut out everything except 15 pages. And people were doing really well with this process. They were getting managers. They were getting, they were really moving with this process. So I really wanted to only do that and not also read scripts that had been done outside of this process, then sent to me. And here would you do notes on the whole thing like I'd been doing for 20 years. And I remember complaining to Melissa and going, well, this is really all I want to do. I wish I could only do this in my consulting. And Melissa going, so only do that. And it took me a while. It took me a while to listen to her. And when I did, and now I only do story to script, people write me all the time, will you read my script? And I have to say no. And I feel fine about that because I know that this is what I do now. That's my process. I'll refer them to another consultant. It's actually made me way less precious about, way less competitive. Let's just say that. Now I can actually push it over to other people I respect instead of looking at everybody as the competition. Because this is what I do now. And it's only what I do. And I'm going to say no to the other stuff.
That's really powerful. I saw that with my construction company when I found the power of no. It changed my whole business really, where I was doing projects more in line with what our company's strengths were, right? And that was it wasn't a size of a project. It wasn't, we were still doing things of all shapes and sizes. My brother still has the company and is still doing that, but just the right project for for a bunch of reasons, right, that I had kind of outlined. And it's not like I had it posted on my website, but when I would talk to someone, I was it got to a point was I was interviewing them as much as they were interviewing me for this project. And I think that when you can get to that point in your business where you've identified, this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is what I want to do, that's when not only are you going to see the success, but that's also when I think you're going to produce the best results, because now you can be in your flow state so much more of the time when you're doing what you do.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
So with that said, I know we're almost out of time, but what's next for you? So we've got your professor, you've got story to script, which you love. What else is going on in your drip trickle flow flood?
Well, I still really enjoy working for other film organizations and other companies. So in September, I always call it my hell month, but it's interesting. I coach the writers and producers at the Mia Market, which is out of Rome. It is an international film market that highlights certain writer producers, puts them on the stage, and has them pitch to international producers and investors. And so I coach every single day in September. I coach this group as part of the Mia Market. So that kind of work, I still love doing that, and I'm always open to doing that with organizations that have interesting projects that they want to involve me in. So I will continue to do that kind of work, and I have a couple of thoughts about some other things. The Substack thing is something that I'll probably be asking you about. I
Okay.
have taken my Constant Contact newsletter down, and I intend to go to Substack, and would like to start offering more informational newsletters and things like that. So I am hoping to sort of maintain uh, a bigger audience by doing so.
Oh,
But
we
in the
can get that
meantime,
going.
yeah. But in
That's
the
an easy
meantime,
one.
if anybody wants to get in touch with me, on the page.tv is where they should look for all the stuff that I do.
And you can also we'll link to everything for you all in the show notes. And also, she has obviously an almost 1,000 episode archive of her podcast you can listen to.
Right.
So you can get loads of information and pick up her book 100%. It's a must for any screenwriter or anybody that just likes to tell stories or tell stories in other capacities. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Pilar. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your wisdom. It was so nice to have you.
It was an honor. This was so cool.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pilar. This has been great.
Thank you, Tony.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, everybody.